Hello, my name is Nicholas Junker, and this is for Module 15, my case study regarding Truman Elementary. So, answering the first question, Category 1, what do we know? So, kind of a little bit of background about the school it's Truman Elementary, the pre-K through 8. It's one of 4 K-8 schools. It has the greatest number of students. It has 700 students. 15% of those are on free and reduced lunch. 5% are on ELL. We also know that the reading scores are in steady decline. Uh, the median score is declining. The cohort score overall is declining. And they go from grade level to grade level, their scores are declining. We're also, some of the things that we know we're looking at is, one of the things we know about the issue is that the parent-teacher organization wrote a letter to the principal asking about the reading issues, talking about parent concerns, and this leads to some really bad perception issues. As a school, it is very difficult to repair those relationships and those significant vision things that can alter how people view your school, and so we need to nip this in the butt right away. So one of the things we also notice is that myself as a principal, I've already done an analysis of what types of things go on in the classroom as in regards to reading instruction. And I've also asked for our independent reading supervisor to do it as well. She has come up with areas of concern and recommendations that we know as well. So we're going to look at what do we need to know. This kind of took the way that all data is kind of configured through schools, those 4 different pieces: demographics, performance data, school processes, and perception. So things we need to know for demographics are, what are class sizes at our school? With 700 kids, it said it's split 3 ways. The math looks at about 23, 24 kids. Something I'm concerning is, what do other schools look like? We are the biggest school, so we probably have a higher amount of students in our school, lower or a higher ratio as well, and so that's something that we need to look at. What could impact learning? I need to look at how many students with special needs do we have. That can obviously sway the way that the testing goes. Looking at racial breakdown, looking at attendance rate, because we know if students are not at school, they're not learning. The same goes for suspension and expulsions. If we have behavior issues, they're not engaged in the learning process, and so that can be difficult as well. Another aspect of demographics is teacher quality. Do we have some unlicensed teachers in the classroom? Do we have a high amount of inexperienced teachers? Those things are important to look at, what we need to know. In terms of performance data, what are reading scores district-wide? Are they comparative? Are they all dropping? Or are we kind of the outlier score? That's something that we need to know. What does historical data look like beyond that 3-year historic data? So we know that the last 3 years we've been in a little bit of a downward trend, but what do they look like before my time, as I've been here for the last 2 years as well? And then we also need to look at kind of a disaggregation of data. We need to look at what is our state assessment data, as it discussed, as it breaks down into differing teachers. What teachers are using strategies that are working, what strategies are using teachers that aren't working, and we need to get that as well. What are the demographics for each part of each classroom? And so we can kind of break that down, disaggregate it as well. And something that we don't have right now, but something that I will propose in my plan is, we need to be able to know what they're doing per skill, and what are they doing, how are they doing on reading fluency, how are they doing on comprehension. Those types of things are things that we would like to know. Things also we would like to know in terms of perception and school processes. Looking at perception, looking at teachers, are they aware of the issue? At times, sometimes you can get a lot of data thrown at you and you don't even understand it, and aren't able to use it as an action step, but maybe they don't even know. How do they feel about their current curriculum? Maybe they understand that it's flawed and they understand it needs changes, but they just don't have a voice. And then lastly, do they feel there are barriers to student education? Teachers are the best way to have a pulse of the school, to understand what is going on and what changes need to be made. Looking at parents, we do have the letter from the parent-teacher organization, but and looking at, besides the reading aspect, how do they feel about the overall level of education? We see the math scores are on grade level, but besides reading and math, or what are other metrics we're looking at in terms of overall student achievement? Also looking at, do you think your teachers do a good job at your child's school? We obviously see that reading is an important thing, but generally overall. And then also, are there areas of concerns other than reading instruction? You see reading instruction is struggling, but are there other areas regarding your students' education that we need to know? And also the last thing, what we need to know are school processes. Is this issue that we're discussing here, is it already being addressed? Are there things in place that are already attempting to address the issue but aren't working, or just getting started working? Those are the things we kind of need to know. What other math assessments are employed? Types of local assessment, types of technological assessment. What are we doing besides the state assessment that could be able to progress monitor our students? Also looking at is, are there adequate support staff available? It said we have a 5% ELL population. Do we have an ELL certified teacher? Do we have paraprofessionals that are in the area? Do we have a math specialist? Do we have a department head that looks at reading and math? Those things, we don't know those things, and those things are vital to it. And also, has there been targeted professional development? This has been a downward trend for 3 years, and as an administrator, it is my job to make sure that if there is an issue, we need to make sure that we remedy that, and through some of that target professional development, we could do so. One of the last things, what we need to know is there is a Every Student Succeeds Act through the federal government has offering research-based reading grant. And so one of the things we need to know is, do we qualify for the grant? And through my judgment, we have not done so. We are a pre-K through 8 school. The requirements are a K through 4. We do not fit that need. It says that it has to have low performance and a high level of poverty. We have 15% poverty. We do not have a high level of poverty as it relates to our scores. One of the things it also said is that you need to have conduct an adequate analysis of your reading program. A basic observation from a principal and a reading specialist, I would think, would not qualify as an adequate analysis. So if we do want to try to attempt this, even though we are not qualified in the other 2 areas, we need to conduct more analysis. It also says that we need to have an existing knowledge of research-based programs. If we do not have research-based programs already, chances are we don't have a great knowledge of those things going forward. And so if we want to, we're going to have to commit to that as well. And then the last is willing to commit. It's said in the grant that your superintendent and your school has to agree to commit to this process. It's a 2-year process. And so are we really ready to commit to this process going forward? So the basic end of this, the problem is we have those declining reading assessment scores. We have our cohorts declining, our grade level is regressing. From a little bit from the reading specialist here, part of the problem is also we have little to no individualization or differentiation. We have same skill instruction regardless of performance. So even if we have really high learners, they are receiving the same instruction as really low learners, and that obviously is an issue, especially it makes reference to it in the PTO letter where it said the high learners are bored as all get out waiting for the slow learners. I would agree that's a little politically incorrect, but it's part of the process. Also, no small group performance differentiation, kind of referencing that as well. And then also little to no strategic reading instruction. How are we teaching kids to approach learning and go about being successful? And when they're not successful, what can they do to help that? And then so kind of the overall statement of the problem is that something I came up with is Truman Elementary is not conforming to best practices according to current educational research in terms of both content taught and the manner in which delivered. So this is the issue that we have to solve going forward. So my plan is, first, we're going to gather all data. I looked at those 4 different pieces, the demographic, school process, perception, and applicable performance data. We need to hone that all first so we can have a good picture of what we need to do. Then we'll create a stakeholder team with members of all stakeholder groups, members of the community, teachers, administrators, community members, to be able to have a diverse group of ideas. So from that group, we would select a new reading curriculum to fit the balanced needs of reading instruction. Those balanced needs were discussed from that reading specialist that I referenced before, making sure that we have all 5 different areas of reading instruction. And so once we have selected that, we need to make sure that we give our teachers professional development so they can be successful. We need to target our training to make sure that they understand the curriculum, understand the pacing, and also make sure that we give them new methods of delivery. Our reading instructor said that the content and the delivery were lacking, so we need to give them new strategies to do so. Another part of the proposed plan of action is creating a framework for scheduled reading instruction time. It said that 1 hour of instruction was what was given each day. It said that is woefully inadequate. And so we need to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of instruction time based upon best practice. And something that I also found that would be important would be to make sure that we have collaborative plan time, have teachers be able to feed off each other, share ideas with this new curriculum, share successes, failures, kind of collaborate on that going forward. The sixth step is to create or adopt local assessments. We need a way besides the state assessment to be able to progress monitor our students. And so we need to look at educational research, look at other schools, look at other schools in our district, look at schools outside of our district to be able to adopt those assessments to be able to make sure that we monitor our progress and not just have a one-size-fits-all test. So throughout the educational process, we also need to have weekly meetings to monitor progress. And so we'll be able to monitor progress. When we're doing so, we can also receive feedback on the curriculum. Sometimes when it looks good on the curriculum, looks good on paper, it maybe doesn't work for your community. Every community have different needs, different students, and so maybe it doesn't work for you. And so we need to be able to elaborate on that process going forward. And finally, one of the most important is we need to share all of our outside data with our shareholders and make sure that we're also monitoring their perceptions as well, because this process, they pay the tax dollars, they fund the school, and so having them involved in that process is vital. So some appropriate strategies, I feel, is one is making transparency a priority. We need to create ways in which effective and efficient ways, and also make sure it's easily understandable for all stakeholders. If they see that we are buying this new program, spending this money on resources, they need to know where, how, and why. And so we need to be able to make sure that we have avenues that they can access our data and access our process in our decision making. And through that is make sure that our process is collaborative, make sure that we have engaged stakeholders, engage differing teachers, engage differing people with differing expertises, and make sure that they're all part of our process. And then some of the last things is make sure that we're doing what's best practice. There is a ton of educational research that is conducted, and we need to be able to make sure that we are fervent enough in what we want to do to make sure that we are using what's best practice, because there's no excuse not to. So we are looking at making sure that we resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. One of the first steps that I used was making sure that we have all of the data that we can. And so through the evaluation of some of that demographic data, we're making sure we're able to highlight social issues or issues of equity or things that are not being applied appropriately. And so that way we can push to make sure that all students are treated equally. Looking at also the target professional development, make sure that our teachers are able to encourage our students to be more successful, meet their individualized needs, and be able to deliver lessons in a way that makes sure the students will be more successful. I also referenced on that plan time. That plan times will encourage teachers to be able to be successful, challenge their students, share their ideas, their successes, their failures, to make sure that they're better off teaching students overall. The use of a local assessment, we'll be able to make sure that we're able to progress monitor. That progress monitoring piece is so important. Students need to have feedback. Teachers need to have feedback. Administrators need to have feedback. Stakeholders need to have feedback. And so through that progress monitoring, we'll be able to promote success and growth of all of our students. And then creating times available for feedback among all stakeholders. It's important. It's so important to make sure that throughout this entire process, everybody is kept in the loop. Transparency is important, and that's one of the things that I find will make you successful going forward. So, debriefing the problem. Why did things I was thinking, feeling, and valuing? The first thing I was thinking is, why did it take so long, and why did it take a concerned parent to bring about attention to this issue? Why did myself as the administrator, the teachers, the counselor, the administrative team, others in our district not come onto this issue without having to be pushed into it by a parent? One of the things that it mentioned as well is that the principal was evaluating teachers and had to evaluate them once he received this letter. And I was just curious if I had not evaluated teachers on a normal level, not saw that instruction was not up to what was currently accepted as best practice. And then one of the last things I was saying is, when was the curriculum last reviewed? It seems that this curriculum was very outdated. It's basal text to worksheet. And so we understand now that that process is a bit outdated, and we need to make sure that we have differing methods of pedagogy to be able to grow our students. One of the things I was feeling was I was grateful for stakeholder involvement. And maybe if this PTO president and parents had not spoke out, maybe we would have bad scores for the next 5 years. It's important to have that stakeholder involvement. That participation is vital. One of the things I'm upset about the neglect of student progress and achievement. I think teachers are the ones that have the greatest pulse on their students, and if they're not doing well, if they're not achieving, that's something that makes me upset. And the last thing is I'm disappointed with past and with my own administration, as this process seemingly is slow downward trend, and hopefully being able to see the historic data, we'll see that this process could have been headed off, and we can make progress more as we go forward. Things that I'm valuing is making sure that collaboration with stakeholders, that trust for stakeholders, they're trusting us to be able to progress our students, and we weren't doing that as well, and that participation. Everybody needs to be involved in the process, and if they're not involved, they don't feel ownership or buy-in, and so they're not engaging in the process in a way that is effective and efficient. Okay, so debriefing the problem, there are some of our last unresolved issues. As I said before, we did not really qualify for the grant, but if there are ways that we could find grants to maybe meet our needs, that would be effective. We need to make sure that it fits our poverty levels, our performance levels, our age group, and our levels of analysis. And one of the things that also is involved is, are the scores indicative of a greater issue within our school culture and leadership? Is our district and our school struggling for a different reason? Are we not condoning the best instruction in reading? Now, and then one of the things that also is going forward when we propose these new programs, there are always people that do not like change. And so we want to make sure that the teachers are doing what's best practice, and if they're not, we need to be able to make changes or offer that professional development to do so. And then finally, will that new curriculum and delivery that we have selected in our stakeholder group and given targeted professional development, will it make a difference in student achievement? Or will we need to go back to the drawing board once we've applied this for a few years, and change it again to make sure that we are advocating for student achievement? So reflecting on Standard 8, asking those three component questions. The first question, how did I communicate to the larger community about their concerns about the instructional program? And so one of the things that is important, as I've prefaced throughout, is that we're constantly engaging stakeholders, making sure they're involved in the process, making sure they're involved in the data process, make sure that we're constantly getting perception data from them, and making sure that when we have data, once we have implemented our processes, that we show them what the progress has been, or we show them if we haven't had progress, and that way if we need to, we can go back to the drawing board. So standard component 2, looking at the policies, rules, and laws as it relates to students, and making sure that we're achieving for students overall, is making sure that when we do share our data with our stakeholders, that all privacy laws are observed, to make sure that we're not sharing student data, that it's protected. Something that we're looking at also as well is making sure that we look at the negotiated agreement employment laws when we're developing schedule framework. There are a lot of pieces and parts of the puzzle of a negotiated agreement, and they can be tricky when looking at scheduling times and plan times and things of that nature. Also, it's similar as well as when we're looking at creating local assessments. You have to make sure that we're making the best needs for our students, ensuring those social justice and equity, so that they can all be successful. And the final component is looking at putting forth information out into the community, making sure that we're constantly collaborating and communicating. And as I have prefaced before, we felt that when we established the data team, we had members of all stakeholder groups, so that constant communication going back and forth to the community was established right there at the outset. And also through that evaluation and data selection, we're looking at, when we looked at picking a new curriculum and establishing data, they were involved in that process as well. And then finally, when we have made sure that our process is implemented, we will continue to share that data through our progress monitoring of our local assessment that we have established. That is the rest of my video. Thank you.